All right, good afternoon. My name is Mike Harmer. I'm the Chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission in Dewey Beach. Today, we're going to have a public hearing. We've got a couple action items and an agenda as posted. So the first thing we're going to do is do the opening ceremonies and do a Pledge of Allegiance. Let's do that first.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, do a roll call starting with Jack.
Jack Rutherford.
Mark Nordquist.
Dave Lyons.
Mike Harmer.
Fred Townsend.
Bill Zolper, Town Manager.
All right. Like to, and online, looks like we have town officials, Dawn.
Good afternoon.
And Gary Persinger, Commissioner Persinger,
How are you?
and Jimmy.
Jimmy O'Connor's on his way, so he'll be there in 2 minutes.
Okay, Jimmy's on his way. All right, perfect. So we have a quorum. We can go ahead and get started. First thing we need to do is if I could get a motion to adopt the agenda.
Make a motion.
Thank you.
Second.
All right, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. All right, the agenda is adopted, and I emailed you guys the meeting minutes that Dave did so graciously craft up, which
That was an effort, let me tell you.
that was an effort. Yes, thank you, Dave. I guess a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
Motion.
Second?
Second?
All right, second by Dave. And discussion, any changes? I didn't see any myself. Don't see anybody recommend any changes. So we'll go ahead and, all in favor of approving the minutes, say aye. Aye. All right, that's a unanimous approval of the meeting minutes from June 27th, 2024. All right, first thing we're going to do is to discuss and possibly vote to appoint a new chairperson of planning and zoning. And then after that, secretary. So where we're at now is there's 7 members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and we have, there's 7 positions, and we have 5 filled. And due to my personal schedule and work schedules, I've asked if I could step down, just slide over, and talk to some folks in town and around, and it sounds like that's a possibility, and that's what we're here to do today. Dave, Vice Chair of Planning and Zoning Commission, I guess I'll let him speak for himself. He stepped up and said he would do the chair if I was going to step down. There's no hidden agendas or anything like that. It's just busyness, and I guess at this point, any discussion of doing that? What we'll probably need is Dave, do you want to say anything?
Sure. I mean, I'm happy to take the position. I've been doing a lot of work with Mike and with the town on other issues around zoning. I talked to Dawn a lot, and Jim and Bill, so I'm familiar with a lot of the zoning issues, a lot of issues that are coming up in town. So I think I can, kind of take the leadership role here. I think it's important that Mike stay because he brings a valuable thread to the past and what's going on. And obviously, both of you guys have been part of the town for a long time and have a lot of experience in what's going on. So just kind of a minor change in terms of, who writes all the minutes and who conducts the meeting. So. Okay.
All right, so, and Jimmy O'Connor is just arriving, and we're on, that's, hey, no problem, Jim.
I was here yesterday at Town of 5.
So we got Jim.
I didn't want to miss that.
Yeah, we're looking at, we're at number 1, discussing appointing a new chairperson, and Dave just spoke a little bit here. And so we're looking to do a motion to, I guess, unless there's any more discussion, if there's any more discussion on it, we'll look for a motion to say appoint a new chairperson. Recommend.
So one way to
do this, yeah.
One way to do it would be to ask if or to open the floor for nominations. So and then if you get a nomination, which I assume you will, then you might ask if there are any other nominations, and if there aren't, then you go ahead and vote on the individual nominated.
Excellent. That's a great input. Thanks, Fred, for setting us straight here. So I'm looking for nominations for who would like to nominate somebody to be chair.
Nominate Dave Lyons.
I second that.
All right, we got a Dave Lyons from Mark and a second with Jimmy O'Connor. And so I guess at this point, we
So
will.
you could ask if there are any other
Any- yeah,
nominations.
any other
Just
nominations?
for the record, you would ask if there are any others.
All right, are there any other nominations from online or from the room here? I see none, hear none. All right,
So you can now ask for a vote.
all right, and so we have a motion to appoint Dave Lyons as Chair of Planning and Zoning Commission, and now we'll take a vote. It's just individual vote, if you will. Jack, start off.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Unanimous. Dave, you're the man. Finding a secretary may be challenging. Now, keep in mind, we might have an interim situation because we're going to be looking for a couple other volunteers as the future goes on. But next item is discuss and possibly vote for a new secretary, Planning and Zoning Commission. We'll do it like we did before. Any nominations, and then you got to a volunteer confirmation after that, I guess. I have no nominations.
I don't have any nominations.
No, it's not.
It's a lot of quiet. Good for you, Dave. A lot of quiet.
Who do you want to nominate?
Welcome to the chair.
So it's fine. I do the minutes anyway. It's primarily what it's about. So I'll just
find
keep the
somebody.
position for now. When we get somebody new, we'll ask them to pick somebody who's a good writer.
So we're good to do that?
So at this point, you've got, you're just not going to act on appointing a new secretary. Because,
Correct.
yeah, I think on a temporary basis, that's not an inappropriate thing to do, but you should endeavor to split up those responsibilities when you've
Okay.
got a field of people to choose from. Yep.
All right, we're going to open a public hearing regarding an ordinance to amend Chapter 101 flood damage reduction of the municipal code relating to the freeboard height requirement for the elevation of buildings, structures, and equipment. And online, we had a lot of information, all of which Dave worked extremely hard with lots of people to come up with the information. So I'm just going to turn it over to Dave Lyons. I guess you're the secretary, or you're the chair now, so I guess
You finished the meeting today.
all right, I'll finish the meeting
You
today
finished the
then.
meeting
All right,
today.
if
Then I'll take it up.
that's all right with Fred. So Dave has, from the online postings, I guess you want to talk about whatever you want to talk about. and we'll
Yeah,
go from
so
there.
first I want to thank Dawn for all her help in assembling this. There's a lot of back and forth, a lot of consultation, what we've got here. So let's just take a minute and just remember how we got here. In the last meeting, this was the last item we talked about. I don't know if you had enough time to really cover it off. We were all tired, and so we didn't really get a chance to move forward on it. Also, because it had been 4 months since the commissioners had, more than 4 months since the commissioners referred to us, the issue was kind of dead. So the commissioners then brought it up again. Commissioner Persinger brought it up. They referred it back to us again today. So that's how we get here today. My goal here is to give you some information, have a discussion, and hopefully come to some recommendation. Either adopt a current ordinance or make another recommendation within the ordinance to go forth today. Okay? No agenda on my part, nothing, no firm feeling one way or the other on this. So, okay, let me give you a little background real fast. I'll move through. If you feel this is too slow, let me know and I'll pick it up. But the National Flood Insurance Program was established back in 1968 with a goal to reduce the socioeconomic impact of flooding by providing an affordable insurance program and encourage communities to adopt and enforce floodplain management regulations. FEMA administers the NFIP. Its role is to evaluate flood areas and develop SFHAs, special flood hazard areas. And the purpose of those areas are to create risk awareness, define insurance requirements, guide for building standards, and help communities manage floodplain practices to reduce the risk of flood. So I'm sure all of you know that 3/4 of Dewey Beach is in a special flood hazard area. It's roughly 3/4 of the town. I think from about Clayton Street down is an accurate statement. There's a map here we're going to talk about in a little more detail in a second. So the town signed up for the National Flood Insurance Program in 1982. I believe that's the right date. The flood damage reduction ordinance can be found in section 101 of our code. It was updated in 2014, was approved prior to that, but we're working with, I think, the current version of 2014 is accurate. So the town also participates in the community rating system, CRS. It's a complement to the NFIP. It provides discounts for flood insurance through better plain management process. In other words, the town adopts those processes. It's evaluated by, I think, DENRAC and FEMA. And so if we comply, and it's not easy, In the original packet were all the different things it goes through. If you've got questions, Dawn's going to be the best one to speak about that one, but we do participate. It is important. It goes along with getting insurance discounts for ourselves. A couple of things that are driving it from the town perspective. First of all, the Climate Change Committee recommended that we increase freeboard. The town charter does indeed support or suggested evaluating increased freeboard as part of its 10-year plan. Also to note, the commissioners approved the new town hall to be built at 3+ freeboard in their decision. So currently the freeboard is 1 foot. All right. Any questions there?
In that commissioner vote, was there conversation about different heights other than the 3+, or was that pretty unanimous right down the board?
I did not hear any discussion. Commissioner Persinger might have a comment, but I didn't hear any discussion on the 3 foot.
Just quick.
Let me just give you, Gary?
Well, I was just going to say, as I recall, it was a unanimous vote.
I just didn't know if there was, conversations with other towns or, what got to the 3+, but, it's all good.
So Jack, I'm going to come through and give you some examples.
Great.
And, our goal here is to say what makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So I mentioned the term special flood hazard area, base flood elevation, flood insurance rate maps, and zones are all interconnected in flood risk management. So let me just take a minute how it relates. Special flood hazard areas are areas defined by FEMA as having a high risk of flooding with a 1% annual chance of flood. And they define it as around a 100-year flood or greater. That also means a 26% probability of flood for a 30-year mortgage. These areas are depicted in FIRMs, which are the flood insurance rate maps. And those maps have basically different zones, AE, AV, we're gonna talk about that more in a minute. Base flood elevation is a computed elevation to which floodwaters are anticipated to rise in a base flood event. BFEs are used to determine the required elevation for buildings and structures within a SFHA to minimize flood damage, okay? Maps, the firms are created, or the official maps created by FEMA that show the SFHAs, the BFEs, and the flood zones. The flood zones are specific areas within the special flood hazard area that indicate the level and type of flood risk. So we're going to talk about this more, but there's zone A, AE, and V, which really pertains to us here today. Okay. There are others. And if you want to go to the map, I don't know if you guys can see it or not. It's the next page with the map. So this is actually a firm map that details the BFE and zones established by FEMA. So just a second, and John, make sure I get this right here. The AO zone, which you see there in pink, is a sheet flow rise that happens in heavy rainfall. Basically, it's the ground cannot absorb all the water, and so flooding would occur as a result. AE is high risk due to the proximity of floodplains, rivers, or other bodies of water. In this case, the blue area, which is Rehoboth Bay. V zones are high risk flooding as a result of flood action. So you see all the V zones are basically on the ocean. Okay. The number with the zone becomes the BFE. So if we take a look at right around the shoreline, I see a VE11. So that would be 11 feet above mean sea level. Basically what that says. Okay. There are some in the north end. Dawn, is the north end, is it an X zone?
The majority, let's say up around Chesapeake, Carolina, West Street and so forth, that is considered an X flood zone.
There is some at the very
But
north
further,
end.
the
Go
very
ahead,
north end, a little further up, there is a VE zone. It is also what's called a coastal barrier reef. Can't remember exactly what those initials stand for, but however, they're in a very vulnerable state, and they, if I remember correctly, are not able to get flood insurance.
I think those are the ones up on the beach, like further up, right on the beach. Those big houses there.
And you said the NR is mostly X, is that correct?
Mostly X, I believe. So it's not in flood zone. So my house, personally, on Chesapeake Street is in an AE zone.
Yep.
Right on the lake.
Yep,
But most of the rest of the north end is not.
pretty interesting.
Yeah, very. So, okay. All right, so let's move on. So what's freeboard? So freeboard is a safety factor. It's usually expressed in feet above flood level for purposes of floodplain. So why have freeboard? Well, there are many unknown factors that could contribute to flood heights greater than the calculated height. Remember, BFE is a calculated height. In the packet, there's 5 or 6 different things that FEMA uses to calculate that number. It's a calculation. Freeboard is a safety factor. And we'll talk about it, but BFE does include things like wave height. There's a diagram here, we'll go over it, but it's a safety factor. That's the way to think about it. Okay. So, let's move on. So, this came up. What do other local municipalities do? So Rehoboth is +1 freeboard. Now, most of Rehoboth is not in a special flood hazard area. Lewis just raised their freeboard to +3. I think it was in October. I think that's right, Dawn? I think it was just
Their 3-foot freeboard became effective May 2024.
Yeah. So when I talked to John Robitelli, I believe is his name, they evaluated what sea rise was expected to be in 2100. So they looked out that far. We'll talk a little bit more about how they talked to the community and what they did.
Yeah.
Bethany Beach freeboard is 18 inches. That's been since 2018. South Bethany has no freeboard. It is a voluntary 2 feet, which allows for an increase in the peak of the roof, 2 feet for the roof. So you can go up 2 feet, and then the peak of the roof goes up 2 feet. Fenwick is 18 to 24 inches. The code is confusing in terms of why it's 18 versus 24. But Antelope Acres is 3 feet. So just to give you a sense of what everybody else has done with their freeboard. Okay. So next question would be, why increase freeboard? So it's a safety factor. It brings enhanced protection in heavier than expected rainfall, which can exceed BFE. BFE basically is there to reduce the flood risk. It provides enhanced protection. It's also to increase safety. Higher freeboards in the term of flight would hopefully produce safety margins against storm surges, heavier than expected rainfall, which could exceed BFE again. Higher freeboard or increased freeboard should provide for lower flood insurance programs. It should be initial year savings, and then as you accumulate those savings over time, there's a chart here we'll go through, that should more than cover any kind of the initial cost of improving a house to the higher freeboard. It also should increase property value marketability. It also will yield to higher points in the CRS, that's incentives and incentives towards insurance discounts. And lastly, for the environment and community benefits, reduces the floodplain development, preserves national floodplains. It also should reduce or improve community resilience. So eliminate economic and social impacts if there is a flood. That's basically why you would do freeboard, increase freeboard. We'll go on to the next page. So there's a study that was done by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. It's also Allstate and the U.S. Commerce Foundation. And there was the study's called the Preparedness Payoff. And they took 25 different models of disaster scenarios ranging in damage costs from $1 billion to $130 billion in communities across the country. Each model revealed substantial economic savings resultant from upfront investment in disaster resiliency programs and resources, preserving millions of jobs and household incomes, reducing the number of people displaced from their homes, and maintaining production to help local economies rebound faster. So the number that's there that's important is that study showed a $13 return on $1 investment in terms of implementing a resilience strategy. So that's one of the benefits. Okay. Now, the next slide says, why increase it to 3 feet? We've kind of talked about this, but this is really a balance. It is a balance between safety and affordability and cost. It's basically what 3 feet is. Ideally, the additional cost of 3 feet would be offset by the long-term insurance benefits. Plus, our whole point here is to keep the town and its people safe. So that's why you would want to increase freeboard. And also, there's also a thing there, it's like 1 inch of water in your house can cause like $25,000 worth of damage. If you go higher, like one of the questions I had was why not go to 4 feet or 5 feet? The issue there, and Dawn can speak to it, is structural integrity. As you get up higher and higher, you get more structural challenges to make the building safe. You get wind issues. It also makes it even harder to build the house to stay within setbacks, such as staircases and things like that, which impacts accessibility to homes. Okay? So that's the discussion on freeboard, why increase it. The next 2 slides just show potential reductions in annual flood premiums. So the reason I wanted to show this is 1 foot is 25%, and I can tell you in my flood insurance policy, it does show a discount for the CRS, and that would also take into account the 1 foot. When you go to 2 feet, it's 50%, and for an additional foot, you get 62% discount. Now, this is a specific instance that was here for $250,000 in building coverage and $100,000 in contents. You know, I want to be careful. This is a model. I don't want to say that just because we go to 3 foot, we can expect that we're going to get, you know, a 62% discount in our flood insurance premiums overnight. So I don't want to set any false expectations. The next slide is a similar example. The percentages are slightly different here because the values are different, $200,000 in coverage and $80,000 for contents. But the piece that's really important is the third column over, which is savings over a 30-year mortgage, which is basically showing that while you're going to get, you know, at 3 feet, $1,500 a year, but over 30 years, it's $46,000, which will should more than offset any increased costs in building a home at 3 feet. Okay. Let's go on to this, and we're going to talk a little bit more about unintended consequences of freeboard, but I think we need to go through these and talk about them. Increasing freeboard does not impact building height. Okay, it doesn't. That building will still be either 32 or 35 feet. It will sit higher, basically, and we're going to talk more about that in a second. But it may give this feeling of buildings towering, and especially if you're an older home and somebody builds a newer home to you, and all of a sudden they're building up higher, you're going to hear it. People are going to complain about it. It requires FEMA and DENREC approval. Our changes are in the flood ordinance. And so, Dawn, correct me, but that ordinance would have to go back through DENREC and FEMA, as I recall our conversations with them.
That is correct. DENREC is the mediator between us and
FEMA and DENREC, I think is what Dawn's going to say.
Yeah, we'll fill in the blank.
I also want to state this change would only apply to new construction and substantial improvements. And substantial improvement is an improvement that is greater than 50% of the appraised value of the home at the time of doing construction. So,
Yeah,
if
not
you,
including the land.
right, not including the land, correct.
Can you say that one more time?
Yeah. Substantial improvement is defined as a 50%, I'm sorry, if your change is more than 50% of the appraised value of the home, it must comply to the new standards, just like it does with the building code, right? So, there is something I'd like to talk about more, which is what we do in the VE community. I'm going to save that one for a minute till we get further on, but we may want to, today there's BFE plus 1 additional foot if you're in the VE zone because it's on the beach. And we'll talk about that in a second. So I started to refer to the next slide, which is height and elevation have a different meaning. So Dawn, make sure I get this right. So height refers to the vertical distance from the base of an object to its top. Elevation is the vertical distance from a point or object to above reference level, like sea level. Okay, so they are different when we talk about height versus where something would appear over sea level. Important distinction there. All right. So our current building height, for the next slide, in a non-SFA area is 35 feet measured from grade. That's grade, right? Not sea level, but grade, because it's not the flood hazard area. If you go into, next slide, into a special flood hazard area, in zones AE and AO, go back to the map, remember zones AE and AO, the flood height is 32 feet measured from the BFE plus the mandatory freeboard.
Just to clarify, roughly Clayton South.
Yes. If you are in a VE zone, which are homes by the beach, It's 32 feet, 32 feet measured from BFE, plus freeboard, plus an additional foot. We give an additional foot because FEMA requires, if you're in a VE zone, that the entire structure must be above, including the bottom support beam, must be above what is the designated flood area, that area, okay? If you are in an AE or an AO, it's floor level. That's the difference. So you could theoretically lose height in a VE zone because you've got an additional foot. So that's why the code was written to give them an additional foot, roughly the foot of a beam.
There were some good details in that online package.
Yeah,
that
no,
showed
you'll see a lot of it
anyone wants to go
there.
back and look at it.
We already talked about the height of elevation. So this is right from Dawn's things that she takes through people that submit a plan that basically describe what's measured from the roadway versus BFE and what needs to be shown on diagrams, drawings. So the next one I think is a good description, a good way of showing. So if you look at a building, the visual point of reference of a building is the ground. And it might be a little better if you look up on the screen. So the ground, right, is what you perceive to be the height of a building. The BFE is basically that floodplain elevation. So you can see that in this case there, it looks like it's a foot or foot and a half above the ground. And then freeboard would sit on top of that. So in this scenario, here's a house that actually sits on the ground. In a new scenario, this house would actually start at the top of that freeboard. That makes sense? So that's why you'll all of a sudden get buildings that appear to be much higher than they were before. But they're not, they're the same height, but we're starting them at a different point. The next one is a freeboard on house pilings, a freeboard illustration on a house on pilings. So if you were looking at a house on pilings, remember BFE accounts for wave action. So the freeboard, that bottom of the house is what I was talking about. The bottom of the house has to be at the top of the freeboard. Okay? In AEAO, it actually, the floor, which would be the line above it, theoretically, would be that where it could start. So that's why we have an extra foot for houses on the ocean. Okay. Next slide. So when we raise freeboard here, that impacts not only the height of the houses, but all the utilities associated with it. So your compressor has to be above, your air handler has to be above. There's also some special limitations. There's some things that, I guess, piping for any tanks that are buried and things like that. So when I make this decision, everything has to go. And I see it on houses today. They actually build them up. Those things are up above to accommodate BFE. Okay. All right, next one. Let's talk about this. This is the unintended consequences. So if we increase BFE, theoretically there'll be more construction costs, increased construction costs. This is probably, of the thing I got in the research, this is probably the #1 concern among developers. Can I recover this construction cost in the value of the house? Now remember, one of the reasons we said to increase freeboard is it should improve marketability of the house. So theoretically, if the house is more resilient, it should hold that value and therefore should increase the cost. That's the theory. Accessibility issues. Dawn mentioned this last time. If you go up, things like stairs, because now you're going up, you're going to need more stairs. More stairs take a longer, I'm going to call it run, and that run could theoretically go into setbacks in the lot. So we would need to account for that, I believe, because that does have obviously impacts for people that need those stairs, or any other additional design constraints, ramps, elevators, that kind of thing would have to be accounted for. And the last thing I kind of mentioned before is aesthetic and design constraints. So buildings are going to sit higher. It could be conflicts in terms of what homeowners like. We know that that's an ongoing issue, right, Bill? In terms of what homeowners feel is appropriate and how we, I'll say, litigate or manage what their preferences are, what we require from the town as a town. So, Dawn, do you have any other comments on that unintended consequences section?
No, that was covered very nicely, Dave.
Okay.
Thank you.
Last time we had the conversation, there were some questions about other case studies, other places that have done this. I did speak with named Carol, I didn't get her last name right, but she was the Director of Applied Projects with the Institute of Coastal Adaptation and Resilience at Frank Britton College in Norfolk. Actually, Dawn found this, and I reached out to her, and she gave me a lot of the information you're looking at today. In the Norfolk area, they've done, and as part of the packet, a lot of increase in freeboard depending on the area around Norfolk and Virginia Beach in that area, because it's obviously a big wetland area. And so they've gone through it. They made some recommendations about speaking with an engineer, which Dawn and I did have a conversation with Robert Palmer, who is with Beacon Engineering, who's now our corporate engineer. We asked his advice on what we were doing here and how to move forward. He had worked with, I believe it was Oxford, and they had adopted the 3-foot standard there. So that takes us to a discussion. So I'm going to be quiet and ask, I guess, should we ask?
Just for the record, the room is empty, but probably, did we open the public hearing?
Yes.
We did?
Yeah,
Okay.
Mike did.
So before you have a discussion, you probably should just ask for additional comment. Yep. From the-
I'll go ahead and take that. So we're in the public hearing. We're in the lifeguard station in Dewey Beach, and there's nobody from the public in the room. So, this is the time that we would ask for public comment. So now we're going to look online. Now Kate, look, and she sees no public people online that wish to speak, but this is the public opportunity.
Mr. Persinger is also.
And Mr. Persinger, I don't know if you want to say anything, and then Dawn next.
No, I have no comments. Just very nice job, Dave.
Thank you, Commissioner Persinger. And Dawn?
No comments, and I thought Dave did a very fine presentation as well.
Absolutely, and we all concur with that. Thank you. All right, so that'll close the public hearing because there's no one from the public to comment at this point. Now we're in the discussion phase, Fred?
Mhm.
Good?
Did anybody send anything in prior to this meeting? Any comments, anything? Nothing?
I saw 0
I didn't
emails.
see
Okay.
anything.
Just
Yeah,
wanna
I
make
didn't
sure
see
that-
anything, and it's been posted, the big packet's been posted, was posted last meeting?
Right.
Back in June?
Yeah.
It's posted again.
Great.
Today, and then we did post this presentation again this morning, but we did post it again for anybody to be able
I
to.
just want to make sure there wasn't an email or anything that came in.
Absolutely. I have not seen anything.
So when I was on planning and zoning before, when Dave King was the chair, we went through this exercise and we set the 1 foot. And it was a great process, diagrams similar to this, et cetera, et cetera. I personally thought the 1 was a little low, but it was an introduction to the town at the time. So it was like, let's start here. And I'm glad we're back at the table. So I really applaud the commissioners for referring this to P&Z. And I hope that we can move forward and get something done. I'm going to support the 3 foot. I think the more is better. I don't know what the freeboard is down in Marco Island that got hit, the big hurricane last year or whatever. And my buddy built a house down there to the new code, and the water went up to his garage, but did not make it in. And he's right there on the water. So, but some of the other houses, the older homes, did get some damage. They didn't get the direct hit, but they still had the sea level rise. So, during the hurricane. So 3 feet's great. I would always look for as much as, is practically possible. And I think you hit a sweet spot with the 3, with all the diagrams, all the research you've done. So that's why I'm going to support the 3. Anyway, not sure if anybody else wants to say anything, but that's what I recall from the process in the past.
Yeah.
I'm allowed to say some of the same things you have.
Okay, cool. I thought this was probably one of the best presentations we've had in front of us, so I really give you a lot of props. I mean, I can only imagine the amount of time and energy it took. I do have a couple questions. Is there any correlation between 3 feet and ROI? Is there any studies that we've seen from other communities that show a house that was 1 foot versus 3 feet or 2 feet that show that return on investment? Do we know of anything?
So the only thing I can point to is the anecdotal evidence that's in here in
Okay.
terms of the dollars,
Yep.
the dollar investment, the return.
Yep.
those studies that were done, so I can point to those.
Okay,
I haven't seen an actual engineering study per se.
okay.
And I think of all the things that we're gonna have to overcome from the public is what you're talking about right there, which is the increased cost versus the benefit.
You know, obviously as, being a real estate broker and owner, we look at the value of an opportunity. And my only question is, you know, for instance, I'm looking at doing an addition in my house. Am I going to outweigh the cost of the return by the investment? And with these homes that are in this coastal community, how much cost is going to be there, especially with that 50%? That's my only, I think, really question there. And then I did see with South Bethany, they offer the 2 feet plus the roof pitch. Is there any thought about offering a same opportunity here? I know we've got some different height requirements with different zoning. Could we offer, I mean, is there an opportunity, do you think?
We can recommend anything we want here
Okay.
today. You know, 3 feet is easy to explain to everybody
Yeah.
across the board. I actually thought about, do we want different freeboards based on the zone, right? AE versus AO.
Right.
I don't know, and I'd want Don's input on that in terms of how hard would that be to administer.
Yeah.
So, you know, that was another thought I had, is
Okay.
that maybe we only need 2 feet on BE, and maybe we do need 3 feet on AO and AE, or maybe we only need 2 feet in AO because it's flat flooding,
Right.
as opposed to water damage that could come from the bay on AE zone. So you could make an argument that we could specify it based on zone.
Okay, I've got one more question and one thought. Is there a structural integrity difference between 3 feet and 4 feet? I know we said that at 4 feet, we bring in question about integrity. At 3 feet, is there? And then my follow-up to that is, what is the cost benefit for, you know, the engineers to get involved in the review process for that, only for the consumer side, the community side?
So I think your first question was cost benefit 3 versus 2.
In structural integrity, at 3 feet, do we see issues there with?
Yeah, so the only thing I can get is what I read is when you get to 4 or 5,
Yep.
the cost is not offset.
It's a wash.
It's not offset, it's too much.
Yep.
There's more cost there than
Than
there's
damage,
benefit. So the cost benefit in what I found seemed to be at that 3 foot mark.
Okay.
That seemed to be it. It doesn't necessarily mean, let me give you another alternative. We could raise it to 2 now,
Right.
and then in 10 years, you could raise it to 3. That could be another option here that we do, that we could recommend. You know, the only thing I'm gonna say is, as we start to stagger the size of houses here, do you take it once
I
and
agree.
move up? Do we have to explain this again in 10 years to everybody again about why we're increasing it?
Yep.
The only thing I do think you ought to consider is things like the 1,000-year flood that's going on in North Carolina right now. All those homes, the intense flow, all we need is one instance like that to justify the 3 foot.
You know, and my last thought is change is inevitable, it happens. You know, I remember when things were built in town and I said, I can't believe, and Dad said, well, what did you think about it when I was growing up, your age? Change can happen. I think you raised an interesting point about the variability of different zones. So, you know, I'm gonna pass the baton over, and I might come back to that because that's an interesting option.
I'm really surprised we didn't get more people from the town in here. You did a great job because, you know, I have no skin in the game. I'm not going to build the house. I'm in the house I'm going to be in. My only issue is people next door to me. You know, if they go up 4 feet and they put a condenser up there, then it's in my window. And I'm speaking for just openly here.
Absolutely.
I'm not, you know.
So to be considered, that's actually part of it we need to talk about. 'cause that's
As far as the square footage, if we go up 4 feet and you can't do 3 floors, you're only having 2 floors of square footage, but you're still paying the same for the lot. I don't see how the square footage price wouldn't go up.
I guess I don't know how the square footage, because the building height stays the same, the setbacks would stay the same. Everything we put in our code about garages counting or, you know, livable space, I don't think, and Dawn, correct me if you think I've misinterpreted that, but I don't think the square footage of a house would change, would it?
So the house doesn't sit on piling, so that 4 feet that it goes up and then the floor starts, what goes in that 4 feet? It's crawl space.
Oh, are you saying that
Okay,
you lose
what
the
I'm
crawl
getting at
space?
is now there's 4 feet gone, you don't have the height to build a 3-story house. With that other garage at the bottom, whatever else, I'm just trying to clear, you know, make this clear. In other words, if you're building a home, you've got a lower level that you go in, you've got a garage, then you have your second floor, and you have your third floor. But when you cut that 4 feet out, the height of the house doesn't change.
Okay, I believe, and Don, correct me here, I believe that we can still have, in that space, you can still have a structure, but it has to be, I'm gonna call it flood breakaway. Well, not waterproof, but if there's a storm, it has to be.
Floodgate. It has to
Yeah,
have flood.
floodgate, it has to have baffles to let the water out. It can't hold the water, that's the whole point. So you could still have a structure in that area, it has to be done differently, so that if there is a flood, it breaks
But
away.
it's not usable
But it can't be
space.
a garage, it can't be.
Well, what
I
it
think it
can
can be a
be is
garage.
it's not big enough.
I think it
It's
can be.
only
a
4 foot high.
Right.
So instead of having 8 feet, having a garage, an area, whatever, for storage or whatnot, then you don't have that anymore. If it's on pilings, of course, then you only have 2 floors. I'm just kind of throwing that out there.
Right,
Dawn, can you help on that one?
See where I'm at.
yeah, because then you're looking at square
Yeah, your
footage
parents'
on
house.
the,
Your parents'
yeah,
house.
mom and dad's houses, you've got 2 stories with the house on pilings.
Neat.
And then it kind of goes into the question of value on square footage, and does that add value, does it hurt value? It's a conversation for, you look at the average ownership in Dewey, I'm gonna be nice and say 10 years is where we see most people buy and sell. And if they are either next to a condenser or they only have the space that they have, the value could be, lessened because of the surrounding impacts. But again, I hear what you're saying.
I mean, you're basically looking at, if you're looking at a $2 million house that has 3 floors and a $2 million house that has 2 floors, 2 floors of square footage versus 3 floors, 3 floors of square footage is much different. So just kind of throwing that out
Yeah,
there.
no, that's fine.
We don't have to-
Let's talk about that, because I think it's important. Dawn, am I correct in saying, I mean, I know on the north end, yeah, we need you, Dawn, so go ahead. Speak up, please.
Currently, there are 3 flood zones in our area. Special flood hazard area. It's a VE, AE, and AO. It is based on FEMA's determination of the kind of wave action. Now, our code does state that the house height of a home, a dwelling that is in a special flood hazard area, VEAEAO, is 32 feet. It does not come down to the ground level. And that BFE, which is what FEMA determines, plus your freeboard, whether it's the current 1 foot mandatory, or if you're considering the 3 foot, 3 foot mandatory, you get 32 feet from that freeboard height up to the highest point of the building. So you can, regardless of whether it's the 1 foot now or 3 foot later, you can still get a 3-story home, because the building height starts at the freeboard point, not any lower.
Make sense?
Is that understood?
So now we're gonna have houses higher.
Yes.
That's the point.
Yeah,
That's what I'm
house
trying to
height.
make sure. That's the difference in what I'm trying to communicate.
Right.
So you can get 3 stories.
Right, you're gonna get 3 doors, the square footage shouldn't change, the height of the
But
house shouldn't change,
that
but it's
green
gonna
might
start
be in your
higher.
back window.
Right.
That's right.
Or they,
So Dawn, the 32, so okay, let's just suppose we're in one of those zones you just said. You got the BFE plus a freeboard. Right at the top of the freeboard, we went to 3 feet freeboard. So now I'm at that freeboard number right there. I can go 32 feet from there, and you're seeing the houses that we're seeing built right now. The 32 feet allows you to get 3 stories, is what you're seeing on your building applications?
That is correct. It depends upon the architect as to whether the property owner wants a 10-foot ceiling, an 8-foot minimum ceiling height per the building code and so forth. That's a design parameter, not necessarily a freeboard or a FEMA standard. But the building height, unless the commissioners come back and change that 32 feet, it is still from the freeboard designation, and freeboard is always on top of the base flood elevation, or BFE.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically, if this was to go out in layman's terms, maybe denote something in simpler terms, just to let people know that from here to here is still how much
We
you
can still
can
do that. We
build.
can still do that 32 feet high. Yeah, that's a great idea.
I mean, just,
Yeah.
just, you're gonna get the same question again.
Absolutely.
Not
So
have to go through
my
the same
big
thing.
concern in this is no matter what we choose today, whatever the commissioners do, and obviously we have to go back to Denrick and FEMA to get their approval before we can do anything. They have to approve anything before the ordinance becomes effective. But I would definitely recommend to the commissioners, public discussions, public education. I know Bill's trying to put something in, I think, the upcoming newsletter about educating the public on the special flood hazard areas of FEMA, the firms.
That, I think, is kind of what's, I don't know if it's upsetting or alarming, I don't know what the right term is, but this is a very important bit of conversation for values, and we haven't had
One person in this room.
not one person in this room.
Right, exactly.
Generally, how many year-round residents do we have?
Well, since COVID year-round, probably over 500.
Okay, so a ton of this community is vacation and investment and second homes. So a lot of the members of our community are looking at how does my asset grow? And I think that a big part of this conversation is what does my neighbor's home potentially look like? And how do we collectively offer something that is protecting of the future as well as protecting of my asset? I don't know what we could do more to have more of a public conversation. I don't want to delay this any more than it's already been delayed, but there has to be more community-based conversation.
Right.
You know, it puts us unfortunately in a bad position, in a sense today, because of the work that you've done, the work that this committee's done with no involvement. And so I don't know what we can do. And maybe I look for some help from our town attorney to give us some direction on what, how, when, how, with little to no input from our community.
It seems like they just wait for the commissioner meeting.
And then that's,
Right, so they don't get their questions answered.
right. My thing is, I don't want to put this commission and our commissioners of Dewey Beach in a position of gotcha, because we know that they'll probably happen.
So the only thing I would say is that if we today made a recommendation based on what we know today, based on, the data you have in front of you, if we made a recommendation for 3 feet.
Right.
And the commissioners take it up and they get a lot of public opinion pushback.
Yeah.
And they say, we're gonna make it 2 feet. Thank you, planning and zoning, for your recommendation, but we're gonna go with 2 feet. They can override whatever recommendation we have. We could say, don't do anything today, and they
Right.
could override us to 3 feet. So I would say the best thing we can do is make a recommendation you feel comfortable with today. And I think you make today and provides for the future, keeping in mind safety, because that's really what our first and foremost is, cost, what the cost would be of a flood. And then I think it's important to say, what's the value of the investment? How do I preserve the value of the investment going forward? And that's the best I got for you.
No, I trust me, I get it. You
So-
put a lot of work in this one.
This recommendation also came out of the climate committee, right?
Right.
So they posted their agendas. I wasn't present for any of their meetings, but it's possible that there was some public input that was taken in the course of making that recommendation to us. The commissioners, during the course of their meetings, had to discuss referring this matter to you. So there was some discussion then. Our town clerk posted this agenda and published the agenda 2 weeks ahead of time.
Right.
At least, on a couple of occasions. But Dewey Beach is a unique animal in terms of, one week there might be 30,000 people here and the
Exactly.
next 600.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what techniques there might be to generate more interest. One might be, we have some builders here who build some of the homes. I don't know if we have like a selected few that are most often
Selected.
yeah, but to the extent that we know we're following action that was taken in Lewis, that should give you some comfort.
Yep.
They have a very active year-round population. So,
Yeah, the other thing I would say, Lewis, Henlopen Acres, because obviously, you have all the canal there, Henlopen Acres. I think you also got to keep in mind, we have the ocean on one side and the bay on the other. At times. So, the chances of those two coming together, there's not that many blocks between them. So the chances of that happening, certainly it's happened down around the bay, down around the inlet. So the chances here are very good. So I think, from that perspective, I think you just need to keep that in mind as you think this through.
I would think the risk in Henlopen Acres is much lower than it is here.
Because a lot of it's higher, and yet they went to 3 feet.
So I mean, basically, I don't want to, drag about a bunch of stuff out, but I'm basically trying to act like, I looked at this both ways. I like this, then I tried to think of the other things. The other items were, I get moving it up. Now, I did some research on a town in New Jersey that got hit by Sandy. Some of the homes had 8, 9 feet of water in them. Then they go up. Everything's great, and then the insurance company won't insure them because they're in a flood zone. So what happens if we do this, and all of a sudden we're getting a discount, and then they come up and say, Dewey Beach, I'm not going to insure you guys anymore, whatever, you already own your home. Well, if you're going to buy one, you can't because you can't get a mortgage. Just, they do it.
We do that.
They
Yeah.
do it.
Well, they could drop us anytime.
Now, once we raise it, it stays there. That's one thing we know.
Right.
But if we raise it and then there's an event, God forbid there's an event, then that happens, or they just turn around and say, you know what? We're not going to insure anything in this zone. I mean, the insurance companies, basically, they can do what they want, or would they have to abide by anything? I don't know. And
They don't, they're not generally required to do
Right.
business in our state, let alone
Right.
in
Drop us anytime.
our town. There is an awful lot of pressure that's put on them. And
Yeah.
also, there is, their goal is to make money. So if the risk is high and the premium is high enough, they'll do the business.
Yeah.
So this will arguably lower the risk. That first dollar of coverage is the most expensive.
Yeah.
That first inch or that first bit of water infiltration is the most expensive insurance premium that you're going to spend, because the idea that your home's going to get swept away is much lower than that you're going to suffer some damage at your first.
that's a good point to have in that.
Yeah,
part of the
remember, so
insurance thing.
in the big packet it had 1 inch of water can cost $25,000 for the.
But I mean, to follow up on it in here and say, exactly how I said it with the damage, it helps
Right.
make a lot more sense.
Right.
And the only other thing would be, is anybody going to bring anything against the town now that the houses are to be higher in one area now because of this freeboard? We just had an instance where, somebody had to do something with the building because of rules and regulations, and now they're letting them do exactly the same thing. So, or somebody going to turn around and say, well, I couldn't build my house at whatever height, now you have this freeboard, and now this house can go up and have the 3 floors on it, which they wanted to do, and they got stuck in, getting 2.5 floors.
So, well, the 32 feet plus base flood elevation plus freeboard is not a new proposal. That's been on the books now for some time. But there are people who would like to have elevated their homes higher, and were not permitted to do it because of the height restriction.
Is there an exposure risk for the town based off of that?
I think that
Anybody can be sued for anything.
well, that's a good point, and you can never say that you're not going to get
Yeah.
sued and have the aggravation and maybe
Right.
even expensive defending. But the town has the authority to make rules and enjoys a great deal of immunity from suit when it comes to enacting ordinances.
I'll stay in my lane.
No, your
No,
comments are
honestly,
very
that's why
valuable.
I'm bringing it up, because I don't know that.
No.
And I just want to make sure that
Good
for
stuff.
the layman, for more people, if they were out there in the group, are going to understand it, because they're going to ask the exact same questions.
The only thing that could be done differently, which I'm not proposing that at this point, but when we were doing it was either I think it was the comprehensive plan a long time ago. We had mailers, we did like, bunch of mailers saying, here's what we're doing, blah, blah, blah. And we got a lot of public response from that. And I really, all I remember is being at the Lions Club, doing that workshop. It was like a workshop, and we put it on. So, but that's a whole, you're talking, I'll talk to you in a year on this right here, if we did something like
But I
that.
also think that related to that, our job is to refer something up.
Yeah,
Our job is not to sit here and ask the community, what do they think about the sun coming up today? So I think that for us, we need to have something ready to go, but also present something that gives the commissioners the ammunition they need, because like Mark said, the average member of our community is gonna come in with about 17 questions that we need to make sure that we are preparing them for, which this is phenomenal. So
yeah, I think we can accomplish, we can get probably a motion today and get it to the commissioners, and it's food for thought. Bill, I didn't like, hey, Bill, you want to say anything, town manager, but, first of all, I apologize. I didn't come around and say, Bill, do you want to speak? So first of all, do you want to speak about anything?
All I'll say is that the Climate Change Committee recommended 3 feet. This has gone back and forth
Yeah.
between planning and zoning, the commissioners, and back to planning and zoning. So it's had publicity, it's been on the agenda. I mean, I think we have 2 folks here. One is involved in real estate, the other one's a builder. They bring a certain perspective to this. I don't think we have that type of mentality or that type of experience on the climate committee. So I think it's good that you're getting this feed from both sides. But it'll be up to the commissioners what they want to do.
Yeah.
now, if we recommended X height, go to the commissioners, could they turn and change it to a different, or do they have to come back to us and say, what do you think?
They can change it.
Right there.
They can change
Right
it.
on the spot. And it's in the ordinance, like basically, the ordinance that was posted.
Yeah.
Is,
What I'm trying to do is make sure that we can give them something and not create more work, have to come back once more, have another discussion, that if they decide that they want to go a different route or agree to our route, then they make that choice.
I think the reason they come back is they really want our input
Yep.
on it. I think they, they voted unanimously to send it to us at the 3 feet.
Okay.
So I think that is where their head's at. They think they wanted a touch point with us to say, does this make sense, yes or no? What are the issues? And I think we've kind of brought a lot of them out here today.
Right.
And obviously Gary will report them back to the commissioners, so.
all right, any other discussion on this?
This was amazing. Thank you very much. Helps me understand a lot more.
That's why I wanted to make
You
sure.
know, I hope that- I hope people take the time to actually read it.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Thank you.
I learned a lot too.
And I'm also in favor of the 3 foot. I'm in favor.
Okay, so Jimmy's in favor of the 3, I guess.
All right, at this point, I guess we'll close
Need a
the
motion?
discussion.
Yeah,
and
close
look for a
discussion,
motion. The motion might read something to the effect of recommend the ordinance as posted to the commissioners for approval and go from there. But that's looking to.
I'm going to make a motion that we recommend to the commissioners an increase in 3-foot freeboard as described in the ordinance that we have in front of us.
Second,
I'll second.
Jimmy with the second. Any discussion on this?
Is there any conversation of going 2 feet and letting the commissioners make the decision between 2 and 3 feet?
We could have a discussion. I mean,
Yeah,
so I guess I'm going to go with 3 because I said earlier. I mean, I was looking for more and more. I'm a little conservative in that area just because I watch
Absolutely.
damages up and down the East Coast.
Right.
I'm not married to the 3 feet, but I like the 3 feet at this point. Dawn's raising her hand, so Dawn?
This is something for you folks to consider. Of course, it was already stated that if we change our ordinance, our floodplain ordinance, it has got to be approved of by both GenREC and FEMA. If you folks vote on the maximum of 3 feet on this, and it is approved by the commissioners, and of course would be approved by FEMA, if down the road, years down the road, it could be thought of, should we have only gone 2 feet? Just be aware that FEMA does want buildings elevated at as much as possible, but to be able to back our ordinance down from 3 feet to 2 feet may and most likely will not be allowed by FEMA at all. So that's just something to consider.
Thank you, Dawn.
Is
Yes.
there a discussion of different zones have different 2 feet, 3 feet possible or not?
You brought that up. and
Yeah,
I mean, I was just gonna reiterate it, but, you know, I think it's just easier to say 3 feet, but it's,
Yeah, I'm
and if the
similar.
commissioners are heads at 3 feet, I would,
Yeah, I want to get in there.
So I think we've got a motion out there, we've got, I guess, a motion and a second, so I guess we need to vote, is that where we are?
Well, is there any more
Is
discussion?
there more- yeah.
Jack?
I just want to make sure the question of if the amendment's going to be made, if it's a no, it's a no. Just on the record, my thought is, based off of return on investment, value of properties, that is my only concern.
Okay.
wouldn't it enhance the property value?
See, it might, it
Right,
truly
right.
might,
I would think
but,
it-
well, if the house next to you has the HVAC
Right,
in
that's true.
your window and the other one doesn't, or, there's a couple factors. If I had a crystal ball, I'd make a lot of money doing what I do.
We don't-
But
when you said
I'm
you-
still looking for that crystal ball. So my only concern for this little community is the value. Obviously, the values in the north end of town and south end and midtown have grown like crazy. So I think value will grow, but my only concern is cost benefit for that. That's all I got.
Can't argue with that, I can't, I don't have anything else to justify that. so.
You've worked your butt off, so you found everything you could find.
I agree with you, it is definitely an issue, and the utilities being up, that's why I showed it to you, because that is definitely an issue, you're gonna see it, people have been asking about it. It's, my neighbor has it, it's 3 feet up, so.
All right, any more discussion?
Just one real quick thing. Dawn has reminded us that the federal authorities essentially have to weigh in on this. So I'm not going to do it today, but between today and when the commissioners consider this, I think I need to rework the effective date
Oh, I see what you're saying.
of this clause, which says it's effective upon its adoption, and actually we probably need to make reference.
It has to be approved, adoption and approved, that would be the right word.
Subject to the
Subject to the approval.
But I don't think we need to amend the ordinance for your use today.
Okay. All right, so knowing that Fred might inject a few words into the ordinance, I guess that's somewhere near section 10-ish. I guess we'll try a vote here. Jack?
You want to vote with an explanation?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, so please.
Yeah. I will vote for the 3 feet, for the fact that we've had many discussions. The commissioners are in favor of this. We have not had public comment that has made us in this commission have any thought of going to 2 feet or otherwise. So for that, I'm going to let the commissioners do their job.
I vote in favor of it.
I'm gonna vote in favor, obviously, I think the argument I made is basically my justification for moving it 3 feet. I think it's a safety factor. I think there's a potential for lower insurance premiums. More than anything, I'm worried about when that event comes, that we're prepared for.
And I'm going to vote yes for pretty much the same reasons that Dave just stated.
I'm gonna vote in favor for reasons Dave and Jack
And Jack.
stated.
And Mark. Mark didn't
I
say
didn't
it.
say anything.
So that's unanimous yes to recommend to the commissioners with a slight edit from Fred. And at this point, committee member comments. I'll personally thank the town for having me as chair.
Yeah, I'd one comment when you're
And
done.
I'll if Dave elevates up or around or
We're not
whatever,
leaving yet,
I'll
right?
come back. No, I'm not going anywhere, yeah. But, I'll continue to support the town any way I can. Thank you very much.
You know, there are at least 8 property owners, counting the owners that are in this room right now and on the climate committee, that thought 3 feet should be the recommendation. So I just wanted to say that. I know there's a lot of other property owners in town, but the climate committee may have been more than that. I don't know, Gary could probably tell us how many of those folks are actually on the, but I know there's at least 5 that were there when they said 3 feet was their recommendation, and then we've got 5 here, so 10 or more possibly are making this recommendation.
And I understand that might have been February 2023 that discussion took place.
Yeah, just a quick point, just to be 100% accurate here. The Climate Change Committee's recommendation did not include a specific number. They did approve, they did recommend an increase in the freeboard, but they did not approve 3 feet, just to be accurate. But it is true, certainly, that when the commissioners voted on the potential design of the town hall, that we were all unanimous in support of a freeboard of 3 feet for the new town hall. But, there has not, by the same token, there's not been any objection from anyone on the climate committee, or as others have pointed out, any public opposition thus far to an increase to 3 feet.
So Gary, was the recommendation not made by the climate committee, but by the University of Delaware or Sea Grant? Because then I'm looking at it, it says recommendation raise freeboard from 1 foot to 3 foot above base flood level.
I'm not sure what recommendation you're looking at.
I'm looking at climate change committee recommendation to increase town freeboard requirements.
Right, but I don't think they specified a number. I'm happy to look back into that, but that's my recollection.
Okay.
I don't think that changes anything else here, but that the real genesis of this whole freeboard issue goes back to the comprehensive plan, where the recommendation there was to revisit the freeboard issue. The Climate Change Committee did take that up. They recommended an increase. Commissioners talked about it. They wanted to have 3 feet freeboard for the new town hall. And, the 3 foot recommendation has kind of evolved from there.
For what it's worth, freeboard is defined in feet by our code. So it really is not inviting a discussion of, 7 inches or 9 inches or 13 inches or something. 1, 2, or 3 feet, I think, are your options.
Right. Or 4 or 5, I guess. But I think we've ruled that way. We can't see that makes logical sense.
All right, any other discussion amongst the committee members? Pretty much had the motion approved. It looks like a little, okay, so motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, aye? Aye.
All in favor? All right.